Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview on how you can prepare and also migrate your It's Learning tests into Canvas quizzes. So a couple of things to know here about this process and really the reason why this video exists. So your It's Learning content, most of it can be exported and migrated to Canvas to the It's Learning and Canvas migration tool that we're going to be using to really do a lot of that migration for the whole district. So your folders, your pages, a lot of other content will migrate over with that tool. And that's going to be taking place throughout the month of June. So that's why, I sent the email with all the information, how to prepare and get your things ready. But if you read through that email and probably how you got to this video, you might have realized that It's Learning tests are not something that our migration tool can migrate over. And you will have to do that manually if you're wanting to keep your tests and quizzes that you've made on It's Learning and bring them over into Canvas. If you keep them in folders that we migrate over, that's fine. You don't have to delete them, but they will just show up as an error message and you won't be able to do a whole lot with them once you're in your Canvas course where we've migrated that content. So really, this video is to walk you through how you can migrate some of your It's Learning tests yourself into your Canvas courses and the best way to do that efficiently. So the thing to know here is I need to go into my It's Learning course and find the specific quizzes and or tests that I want to migrate over into Canvas. And just know that you need to have all of this done by January 30th because July 1st is when we lose access to It's Learning. Everyone loses access then, so you won't be able to do any of this after July 1st, 2023. Okay? So I'm in my It's Learning course and I'm looking at my resources list here. So this quiz is the one that I specifically want to migrate over, but if you have multiple, you will need to do this for each particular quiz or test. Key thing to note here, just because, It's Learning is fun, It's Learning has two test tools, and you've probably heard me talk about this before over the last few years. It's Learning has a new test tool and they have an old test tool. The old test tool is actually the one that is much more functional than the new test tool. And I've really been encouraging all of you to be using the old test tool, partly because the old test tool allows you to export those questions and then import them into Canvas. If you build a test in the new test tool on It's Learning, you won't be able to export those questions. Technically, you can copy those into the old test tool, but you won't be able to follow the steps I'm about to do and to import them with more ease if you use that new test tool. And the way that you can know that you do this is if you go to your resources and click add. The new test tool is this one right here. The old test tool is the one that says test to be discontinued, which is deceptive. It's not going to be discontinued because we still need to be using it. And we're going to be actually done with It's Learning before they get rid of that button. But this is the one you're going to be using to build your tests and where a lot of you have probably been building your tests here in the first place. Okay. So I'm going to go over to that quiz that I know I want to be exported. So here it is. I'm in this view. You don't have to do anything to your settings to get it ready to export. All we have to do is go to this questions tab. And then I'm going to select all of the questions that I want to be exported so then we can import them into Canvas. So to select all of them, I'll click this little checkbox here at the very top. It selects them all. I can go through and do individual ones if I want, but we're just going to do it all to be safe. And then I'm going to click this export button. And what it's going to do is export those questions into a zip file that is in QTI format. If you've heard of QTI format before, if you haven't, I'll tell you what it is. It's basically a standard format of building questions and test questions so that no matter what learning management system that you're using, you can import these questions and it will work. And you don't have to retype everything that you've done. So the idea here is that if, higher education institutions and K-12 schools are switching systems or they're using different resources, there's one common standard here so you don't lose all of that hard work on questions and can easily copy those from place to place. It's also something that learning management systems use when they make question banks and make their quizzes and tests here so that if you happen to move to another one, you don't lose your work like we are. Okay, so I've exported that into the QTI format. So that is all you need to do on the It's Learning part of this. The next thing you need to do is to open Canvas in another tab. So I have my Canvas course open. Sorry, not my Canvas course, I have Canvas open. And then what I'm going to do is go to one of my courses. You can technically import these questions into really any course that you want, but I would recommend that you do this in your sandbox just because anytime you go to your sandbox, that's where we're going to be moving in all of the It's Learning content that we migrate for you at the district. So that's where all of your other stuff is going to be. And I don't like to scatter my stuff in multiple courses, but that's just my personal preference. So if I am here in my sandbox, I'm actually going to scroll down to quizzes, and that's where we're going to be importing this. But I do want to point out, there are technically, like It's Learning, there are two quiz tools in Canvas right now. There's classic quizzes and there's new quizzes. Difference here is that classic quizzes on Canvas is going to be phased out. Probably they keep changing it and pushing it back, but it's probably going to be between 2024 and 2025 now. So that is a quiz tool on Canvas that will be phased out. And new quizzes is the one that I would recommend that you use, the one that Canvas recommends. And new quizzes is where we're getting all of those updates and features and new things. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how you can import your quiz questions from It's Learning into the Canvas New Quizzes tool, just because that's the one that I would recommend. But I am also going to show you how to do classic quizzes as well. The process here for importing them is entirely different. So I just want to preface that before I dive into this and you're like, what is she doing? Okay, so if I'm here in my Canvas course, to import into new quizzes, I'm going to go to the quizzes menu. If you are an elementary teacher, you're going to click Manage Subject here in the top left corner and then go down to new quizzes, or sorry, just go down to quizzes. If you're a secondary teacher, you don't have to click Manage Subject, but your menus here might be hidden under this line menu. So I'll select quizzes. And the It's Learning export file is down here, but I'm just going to close it right now just because it's hiding the view of what I want to do. So you can see here I've been practicing some. So these are all of the quizzes that I've built out. So to import your It's Learning questions, what we're actually going to do is act like we're building a brand new quiz. So I'll do plus quiz. And for us to import into the new quizzes tool, we're going to select new quizzes and submit. All right. So once that is here, I need to give it a name. Give it a name. I can always go back and change these things if I want. So I'm just going to scroll through those if I want. I do it to put a deadline. So deadline and a name are required. And once I'm done with that, I'm going to click build. And when we're in this quiz builder view is where we're truly going to import those It's Learning questions that we had downloaded as that zip file. So I'm here in my view. I can go through, add my instructions, do whatever I need to do. But to import my It's Learning questions, I'm going to come over here to this little three dot button menu, and I'm going to select import content. When I have imported my content, a little button is going to show up here and it's going to ask you, what content do you want to import? And this is where we find that QTI file. So whenever you export your quiz questions from It's Learning, it always puts them in the same QTI file format. You can access those from your downloads menu or download space on your device, but they are saved locally on your device. They're not saved to Google, they're not saved somewhere else. So if your computer starts to struggle, make sure that you download these somewhere so you don't lose them. That's why we're just going to do this right now. Okay. So I'm going to select this file here. If you moved it to your desktop, you can also find it there. And then I'll click import. And then it works its magic and it will tell me that it has finished adding those questions when it is done. And then I just click done. I don't know if you can see that in the background, but it put those there. So it's going to rename my test here to whatever this file was called, which probably isn't what you want your quiz to be named. So I can rename this test here. I can add instructions. And as you can see, it imported my questions. So my sample here was a multiple choice quiz, but I also had a multi-answer question as well. It's Learning new quizzes can support a variety of question types. Now, if you go and you try to import your questions, you can only do one import a quiz on new quizzes and it errors out. It might add some of your questions, but not all, only if, maybe you're trying to import a question type that new quizzes doesn't quite support. So that's also why I'm going to show you how you can import questions into the classic quizzes, because that one does have more functional questions at this point in time than maybe what new quizzes might have. And if you get some errors with new quizzes, it's always worth a shot to try to import it into classic quizzes. Okay, so I'm here. I can go through and I can edit my questions if I want. I can change things. You still have all of those features and options, but I don't have to start from scratch. It's all here for me. The last thing I want to point out to you on this new quizzes import and adding my It's Learning questions here is if I want to create an item bank, I can do that. So I would have to do this for each question, but the benefit of creating item banks here in new quizzes is that anytime I go to build a quiz with new quizzes in the future, I can just import these questions from my item bank versus having to search through, copy, and do all that jazz again. So if I add this to my item bank, I can create a new one. Maybe I just call it ancient China because that was this topic. So I added it. I can maybe add other ones if I want. And to do that, I just act like I'm editing the question and I scroll down to item banking and I click add to bank. And we're going to select it to this new one that we just added. So I can add it. I can keep on going, blah, blah, blah. So the benefit is that if I add things to item banks, I can always import them. So if I go to all banks, these are all the ones that exist out there, but here are the ones that I was just creating myself. So if I have item banks in multiple courses, I can pull from all of those, add them in, and it just saves myself some time. The beauty of item banks is that if you maybe create some like department-wide assessments, you can share those with each other and create them as item banks so that everyone can pull from those. So that is the benefit here of that. So whenever I'm finished, I'll just click return, exit out of this builder view, and my assessment is there. So I can go through and make that active for my students and it's ready to go. So that is how you can import It's Learning questions into the new quizzes tool on Canvas. The next thing I'm going to show you is how you can import quiz questions into classic quizzes. And this does seem a little bit backwards compared to what we just did with new quizzes. So the only reason why you might need to try classic quizzes is if you get some error message with new quizzes and you want to give this a chance. So if I am in, I have to go to a course to do this. So I'm just going to stay here in my sandbox. And then instead of going to quizzes, I'm actually going to scroll down to settings instead. In elementary, this is the same for you. You just might have to click that manage homeroom button. And once I'm on my settings view, over here on the right-hand side of the screen, it says import course content. And that's what I'm going to select because it's going to take me to a screen where I can just select that I want to import a QTI zip file, which is what we had gotten from It's Learning. Okay, so as you can see, I already did some here. But what I will do is select the content type. So we go all the way to the bottom, ignore the other ones, and do QTI. And then I'm going to find that on my computer. So it's right here where it was. Select it. You can name it a new item bank if you want. The key thing here is just don't click import existing quizzes into new quizzes just because it will error out because this is not the way that we import things like we did a few minutes ago. Okay, so I'll click imports. It works its magic. I already did this a couple times, as you can see, so I'm just going to move away from the screen here for a second. But whenever it's finished, it turns green, tells you that it's done. So now you're probably wondering, okay, well, how do I get back to, how do I find where I just imported this into this course? Because it's not super obvious. If you just click this right here, it's going to download that file onto your computer again. So it is a way you can get those back. But if you're wondering, how do I get to my questions that I just imported? It told me it's complete. Where are they? They're kind of hidden as test bank items, which is not the same as item banks in new quizzes. So that's a little bizarre. So what we're going to do now is go back to quizzes, but instead of building a new quiz, we'll do classic quizzes and submit. Okay, so we still have to go through some formatting pieces here. We have to give it a name. We have to select a due date. And I can go back and change any of these if I need to. I'm just putting them in here as placeholders for the moment. But then what I'll do is I'll click questions. And this is only for classic quizzes. You won't have to do this for new quizzes. But whenever I'm here in the questions view, I'm going to do find questions. And what you're going to see here is all of these questions that I imported from It's Learning. So that's what these are. I did this a couple of times. That's why there's so many. But that's where these were located. They're basically called question banks instead of item banks. Item banks is the new lingo that goes with new quizzes. Question banks is the old lingo that was used by classic quizzes. Okay, so I can select all of these questions here and I can add them. Now I do want to point something out. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of the times whenever you add questions into classic quizzes, and sometimes it happens with new quizzes, it will add extra spaces and formatting. And in classic quizzes, sometimes it adds some of this really weird, fun junk before where the real question is. So you might have to go through and edit those and delete them, which I can do. I can still edit my questions here, but it also did that to my answer options as well. It still recognizes the correct answer, but it added some additional characters, words, and things on here I don't necessarily want. So you might have to go through and clean that up, but it does technically import your questions there. All right. So that is a tutorial I have for you on how you can export your It's Learning tests and then import them into our new learning management system, Canvas. As always, if you have questions, please let me know. I know this process involves many steps and might involve some trial and error. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions, and I can help walk you through it and test some things for you along the way. I will say before I end the video that if you are an AP teacher or a teacher who uses a textbook or a tool where your files are in that QTI zip file format, my assumption is that you might get some error messages if you use new quizzes, just because those textbook companies don't consistently update QTI files. So they might only work in the old quizzes or classic quizzes format, but I'm happy to help you out in that. And this would follow the same process of what I did in this video to get your quizzes into Canvas if you have some of those downloaded or from your textbook publisher. All right, so thank you for watching. And if you have questions, let me know. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.